Welcome back to Natural Gallant Bodybuilding, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about volume. Now, a lot of people... Shut up! Train the muscles, not the joints. Somebody asked me about volume. They said they wanted to actually... They want to know about volume in the workouts. And because I advocate a lot of frequent type training techniques, sometimes I use maybe less volume in my workouts. So this person is under the assumption that in order to keep growing, you need to up the volume. Now, that's not necessarily true, although it is one way to access some muscle fibers. You may get some sort of strength endurance fiber work from that. But the ideal circumstance for a bodybuilder or anybody that's training when it comes down to weight training or bodybuilding is that you are not an endurance athlete primarily. Primarily, you are a strength athlete and a strength endurance athlete, but not necessarily an endurance athlete. And that's usually what people become when they do too much volume. So what my point is that there's a point of diminishing return. So don't look at volume in a workout as your main goal. I mean, the ways of increasing intensity is obviously by the first way, increasing intensity, increasing the weight for the same amount of rep ranges. That's basically how you increase your intensity as you progressively overload the muscle or the system. So say you're doing 20 reps at 200 pounds, well now you're doing 20 reps at 225. That is an increase in strength output, and you are getting more volume because you're lifting more poundage. I mean, some people measure it that way. I don't measure it that way, but you know what I mean. Some people measure it that way. So this is really how you increase your intensity on the muscle. It's not about just having more and more and more sets and then one day you're doing like 100 sets for a body part. That's just going to wear you out. And if anything, it's going to overtrain you, and then it becomes more of an endurance activity. So there is a point to where you do too much endurance work. And when you do too much endurance work, your body actually starts to shrink. It starts to actually adapt to just lasting set after set after set after set, but it's not necessarily growing the muscle because you're accessing more of the endurance fibers, not really the power fibers, not really the strength endurance fibers either. Because like I said, more endurance means smaller, really. It just means that you just want to last forever. And that's when you want to be built like a marathon runner, really. Now, I'm by no means telling you to not try and experiment in this. I mean, you could try doing sets of 40, 50 sets, whatever. You could try doing 40 or 50 sets in your workout if you want. If you think that you're actually getting some results from that, go ahead. I mean, I'm not saying to not conduct these experiments, because really the best experiments are the ones where you discover for yourself. But one thing you will notice is that getting stronger and then using that for strength endurance is really how you build muscle, not just doing things that just exhaust you over and over again. So let me get more specific, I guess. One thing I found was that there was a sweet spot for the amount of sets that you should do for a body part, especially given a certain frequency. Say you train a body part every 2 days or every 3 days or every 4 days, whatever. You'll notice that there's a certain sweet spot. Like you'll work the muscle half to death. You might be able to get 15 sets or 10 sets or 16, it just depends on your genetics, depends on how you're built. But you might be able to do absolute exhaustion type workout, do 16 sets for this. Your body just feels absolutely totally exhausted and there's nothing left in the muscle. Where you push the weight, now you're lifting half of what you were lifting in the beginning, or you're doing not even half the reps. I find that there's this critical drop-off point where all of a sudden the reps drop off, or where it feels like you're not really able to contract the muscles. It's like they're just absolutely totally dead. That is when I usually stop the workout. That's when I usually move on to another body part. Or I say, okay, I've done enough volume for today. So going to the extreme and continually just beating the muscle over and over and over again and turning it into an endurance race will cause a different type of adaptation in the muscle. It's almost like your body will start to conserve energy in some way and say, okay, how do I last forever instead of how do I get explosively strong? Now, that's just my experience. Another way to look at it is that when you do too much volume or too much, what happens is the body secretes cortisol because there's just too much stress on the system. And when there's too much stress on the system, what happens is you overtrain. Now, again, I'm all about you conducting your own experiment and finding out where this threshold is, because for each individual, it might be different. You might be one of those people that needs 20 sets for a body part to really shock it and to get it to grow. Or maybe you need 25 sets and only train that body part once a week or something like that. I'm okay with that. guys out of here? Hey, don't be like admiring my gains, man. You can't steal my gains. This magic power's yours. But as a general rule, I've found that there is a point, and you will find this, there is a point of where doing more sets doesn't actually give you more results. It just exhausts you and actually takes away the results. You see, so I find that strength and muscle isn't about endurance. That's what people don't understand. Muscle isn't primarily about endurance. There are endurance fibers in the muscle, yes, but when you want to build big muscles, that's not when you're looking for endurance. You're looking for power and strength endurance at that point. Otherwise, marathon runners will be built like bodybuilders, right? It's just a totally different paradigm at that point. So if you start doing too many sets, you start, doing 5-hour workouts for one body part, yeah, maybe short term, you might shock the system. Maybe there'll be some adaptation that's positive from that. But if you do it all the time, you will notice that you will lose a certain amount of muscle mass in that area. Now, there are some muscle groups, again, that might break the rules in this, right? So I know I'm making a complicated video here. I'm not really telling you for sure one way or not, because what I have found is that there are some muscles that seem to respond better to endurance activity than others. Quadriceps are one of those things. I find quadriceps seem to do better with endurance as opposed to just primarily power stuff. Where hamstring, it seems like they seem to respond more to power type activities. So you wouldn't need as many sets to break down the muscle. You would need as many sets to switch that breaker to cause an adaptation, to cause the body to say, hey, we need to grow in this area. We need to get bigger and stronger to deal with the stimulus. So the question is, how much stimulus is needed? That's really it. How much stimulus is needed in order to cause the muscle to adapt? And although I'm not a HIIT method guy, I'm not a guy that's into the high intensity training like Mike Menser, I never found that worked for me, but he did have a good point. He said, what you want to do is stimulate the muscle enough to cause it to adapt, but not constantly just break it down for the sake of breaking it down. I mean, that's overload. It's kind of like taking a hatchet to the arm, somebody chopping your arm off, as opposed to taking a baseball bat to the arm, right? Both different types of stimulus. One your body will recover from, the other one, not so much, right? So it's the same thing with your training. If you do too much stimulus, you just snap something. You end up getting an injury or an overuse injury or something happens like that. So if you notice a certain area of your body starts to get injured and you're doing a certain amount of volume, there is a possibility to look at your volume to say, maybe I'm doing too much. Maybe I'm beating it up too much or too often. So I either need to lower down the volume, or I need to lower down the frequency, or lower down the intensity. One of those three needs to be adjusted. And there's a fourth one, which is range of motion. And in some cases, if your range of motion is too extreme, that could throw the whole thing out the door, right? That can really cause a problem, even if you're doing minute amounts of volume. So these are things to look at. So I'm sorry I'm not giving you exact numbers, exact answers, but I'm trying to get you to think for yourself, because your body is yours alone, and there's going to be some specific rules around your own body based on your genetics and stuff. So yeah, I hope this helps you out in your training. Thanks a lot for watching, and if you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalgallantbodybuilding.com, and thanks a lot to the patron supporters. And yeah, let's look at the waterfall. There's a waterfall over here. I don't know if you can see it on here. Now, if you're wondering why I haven't went up to the waterfall, it's because it's pretty dangerous to go up there. And also, they put up no parking signs, and I almost got a ticket from a ranger or whatever a little while ago, because they apparently don't want anybody exploring in the forest. So I have my own theories about this kind of crap agenda that's put out by the government, where they don't want you exploring nature or being by yourself out there or anything. But there is also an argument for the idiots of the world that say, hey, look, a cliff, let's jump off it and see what happens, so there's also that. But yeah, this is a beautiful area though. So yeah, I still get away with filming here once in a while. Hence, that's what I'm doing today.